Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. Welcome today to my review of what I think is the new undisputed king of the $200 big brand dive watch category. It is of course the Orient Kamasu. Now when I use the word new, I use the word new fairly loosely. This watch has been around for over a year now. If you look at YouTube, you'll see a couple of review videos made when this watch was first launched, but most of the reviews are over the last 3 to 4 months. That seems to be when the watch has really started to gain some traction. No coincidence there, Seiko discontinued the SKX about 3 months ago now. I think the SKX was such a default choice. If you're looking for a $200 dive watch, it wasn't perfect, but it offered a really strong package and it was the choice for many. I think the Orient Kamasu will be that new choice for just as many people. Now, this watch was sent to me for free by JomaShop. I do not have to return it. In return, they would be delighted, I'm sure, if I directed you to their website if you were interested in buying one of these Kamasus or pretty much anything else. I say it every time, even if you don't end up buying from JomaShop, you'd be crazy not to reference their prices because their prices are super sharp. $209 for the black dial Kamasu that I've got to show you today. $199 for the blue, $199 for the burgundy dial one, if you want a bit of colour on your wrist. Now they have incorrectly labelled this one as the Mako 3. It's not the Mako 3. The Mako 3 is a different watch and I'll tell you how to spot the difference later. Now this is not going to be 15 minutes of gushing praise for the Orient Kamasu. I think it's a great watch. I think it offers a lot for $200, but it cannot possibly be perfect at that price or any price, quite frankly. There is no such thing as far as I'm concerned as the perfect watch, or at least I haven't found it yet anyway. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to rattle through dimensions and specifications, then I'm going to flip the review around and I'm going to go through the negatives of the watch first before going on to what I think are its strengths. Now Orient seemed to be a much more agile, dynamic and reactive company than Seiko were. The SKX remained unchanged for well over 20 years, whereas we're already on the Mako 3 and they've shown with the Bambino that they're happy to do updates as they see fit. Here's hoping that they update this one. I think it's a great watch, but it could be an absolutely amazing watch with just a few tweaks. Let's flip the camera and get on with the review. Alright, let's get on with the review. Decent little box here from Orient. If you've bought an Orient before, they all come in these little packages. Probably just as much packaging as you'd want for $200. Any more packaging means they're not spending the money on the watch. And there is the watch. 1 year warranty, by the way, if you're picking this one up from JomaShop. I'll leave the links for that in the description of the video. Now I measure this one at 41.5mm in diameter. That very much splits the difference between the two SKX models, the larger 007-009 at 43 and the smaller 013 at 38.5. In fact, why talk about it when I can show you it? Here is the Kamasu in a Seiko sandwich. This is a modified 009 on the left and it's a modified 013 on the right. And you can see the Kamasu pretty much splits the difference. And for that reason, I think it will pick up the market share that would have gone to either of these watches. I think definitely guys with smaller wrists could get away with the Kamasu. It wears very much like a 40, thanks in no small part to its relative slimness and compact lug-to-lug dimension. Those dimensions being 13mm thick and 47mm lug tip to lug tip, so it's going to wear well on a variety of different wrist sizes. Lug width is 22. I reckon they could have gone 20. It wouldn't have looked disproportionate, but they've chosen 22. There is thankfully a little bit of taper on the bracelet, tapering down to 20, back up to 21.5 at the clasp. Now this one sized up for me, it fits me well, 7-inch wrist, pretty much average. This one weighs in at 159 grams, so there's certainly a bit of chunk to this watch. I assume that it's made of 316L, Orient don't specify, but stainless steel of some description, I'd imagine 316L. Case, crown, bezel and bracelet. Now it does have hollow end links and it does have a pressed clasp. Those will appear in the moans and niggles section later on, you can be sure of that. That leads me to think that most of the weight comes from the head of the watch. I'm sure partly because of the sapphire crystal. Probably the biggest ace card that this Kamasu has is the upgrade to sapphire. You will not find sapphire on a Seiko or a Citizen Watch at the price, who are this watch's main competition. No anti-reflective coating on the underside of that crystal, but again, you wouldn't expect that for the price. I'm just delighted that it has sapphire. Bezel action here, 120 click, unidirectional. It's not too bad at all. No backplay, no bounce. It's a little bit lighter than you might expect if you're used to Seiko watches, but pretty good all in all. Aluminium bezel insert on this one. Couple of little indents here, so it's not going to be as easy to replace. I'm guessing there'll be some manufacturers making custom ones of these for this watch in due course. Popping a link to show you the case back, screw down crown, screw down case back, 20 bar, 200 meters of water resistance. Not ISO certified though, so you will not see divers on the dial when we zoom in there. I think in reality though, 200 meter screw down crown is going to be quite enough water resistance for the vast majority of people. Usual spec sheet here, stainless steel, sapphire crystal, etc, etc. And the movement, now the movement in this one is an Orient in-house F6922. Hacking and hand winding, 22 joule day-date complication movement, roughly 40-hour power reserve, stated tolerances of -15 to +25. Let's pop this one on the time grapher. So first time I've had the Komatsu, which means Barracuda in Japanese by the way, on the time grapher. Kind of mix showing here, healthy amplitude, slightly larger beat error than I would have hoped for, but that seems like a reasonable deviation of between 5 and 7 seconds to the positive each day. Orient are quite clear to specify on their website that this one should be measured over the course of a week. I'd imagine you're going to get something like that, +5, +6, over the course of a week on wrist. Alright, let's zoom in on the dial before I get stuck into the negatives, because I think the dial is definitely one of the more pleasant aspects of this watch. It is rather pretty. A few extra design details that you don't necessarily get on a more tooly Seiko watch. You're going to have to get used to a little bit of extra Orient frippery, those little indents here and there, the embossed logo, and it's a little bit chintzier by comparison to a Seiko, but I think that makes it even more suitable as an everyday watch, as a kind of desk diver, if you see what I mean. You certainly don't get applied indices like that on a $200 Seiko, do you? Nice big triangle applied there at 12. You have rectangles at the 6 and 9, and trapezium-shaped indices everywhere else. Quite a considerable frame around the day-date complication at the 3 o'clock. Printed chapter ring on the face of the dial, leaving the Rehaut nice and clean. No chance therefore for the Rehaut chapter ring to be misaligned, because it's a plain stainless steel Rehaut and the chapter markings are printed on the dial instead. You've got that slightly embossed Orient logo under the index at 12 o'clock, just stating automatic, and water resist 20 bar above the index at 6, and advertising that it is a Japanese movement in the back of this one. Now the handset, that's the way you can tell that you've bought yourself a Komatsu and not a Mako 3. If you look for that high polished hour hand, and it's got that prominent triangle tip with a little nick, a little indent at the back of it, that's how you know you've bought a Komatsu. I do like the handset, big, bold, sword-shaped hands, very nicely in proportion to the size of the watch, and that red-tipped second hand, another really nice little touch, I think. Overall, super legible, handsome, if a little bit on the dressy side rather than the tooly side. Okay, so that's the basic specs, etc., and we've had a good look at the watch. Let's start with the moans and niggles section. What am I going to complain about? Well, the crown. The crown is too small and not particularly grippy. We do have the nice crown guards there, meaning you're not going to rattle it and crack the crown stem, but it's not all that easy to engage. You twist it down. I did all right there, but half the time you're trying to engage it and you don't quite make it, and you spend a few seconds pushing around. There we are. Once again, I've got it engaged. I think maybe a little bit more knurling and a little bit bigger. Plenty of gap there. They could have afforded to put a slightly larger crown in there, I'm sure. And I hinted at it earlier on, the case finishing is alright if unspectacular. Look at the light bouncing off that high polished surface on the mid case there. You can see the ripples. The polishing isn't super smooth. $200, I'm not going to complain about it too much, but I am going to point it out. Most of my complaints though, no surprises, come with the bracelet. $200 watch, that's the area that most brands cut corners, and Orient are no exception. End links aren't particularly well fitted. They're hollow as noted. Push pins I've got no problem with. The clasp though is a bit of a cheapie. It's a pressed one as opposed to a milled one. Yeah, again, not too much, but they've stamped the Orient logo, and in doing so, they seem to have buckled most of the clasp. Also, double security, I do appreciate that, but that fold over isn't all that auspicious either. All of these things quite easily resolved though if you are prepared to drop some money on a strap code or similar bracelet, an aftermarket bracelet at a later date, but nothing I would say was too pressing. Buy the watch, enjoy it, scuff up the bracelet, and when the time comes, perhaps pop it on something a little bit more fitting. Alright, enough negatives, let's get on to some positives then, starting with the lume. If you watched Lume Wars episode 3 last week, you'll have seen this watch make it all the way to the final. I'll leave a link in the top corner of the screen if you want to check it out. It beat some fairly expensive watches in the form of a Doxa and an Oris on the way there, this plucky little $200 Japanese diver. I'm not sure what lume it is. This being a sister brand of Seiko, perhaps they smuggled a couple of bottles of Lumebrite between factories. It looks like Lumebrite and it certainly lasts a fair duration of time. Very impressive lume application on those applied indices and especially so on the hands. And it wears really nicely indeed. As I said, I've got a 7-inch wrist. I think this one wears much more like a 40 than the 41.5 diameter dimension that it says on the calipers. 22mm lugs, I think they could have got away with 20, tapering down a little bit more. There is a strap code Jubilee for this. It's close to $100, but I think that could take this watch to the next level. I think I'm going to end up picking that one up over the next few weeks. But that's the proper overhead shot. I do love a black dial dive watch. You can see a little bit of the sunburst effect under the studio lights. Super legible though, all very nicely in proportion, the dial, the hands, etc. And that's it outside in some natural light. Like I said, it could have done with a bit more anti-reflective coating on the sapphire, but I'm not going to complain. I'm just so happy to see sapphire on this watch in the first place. On wrist, you can see there that compact lug to lug, little bit of curvature to those lug tips, not too much protrusion from the case pack means it wears very nicely indeed. So in sum, a lot to like about this Komatsu then, far more to like than to dislike. Most of my complaints come from the bracelet. That is an easy swap when the time comes. Nothing too disastrous to get you started, but I think this watch, the head of the watch, is good enough to warrant spending a bit of extra money on it in due course. So the new king of the $200 big brand dive watches, without a shadow of a doubt. So there you have it, the new king of the $200 dive watches, the Orient Komatsu. It's not a Seiko, and there are a number of characteristics of Orient watches that you're going to have to get used to if you are transitioning out of Seiko and into Orient. For example, they're a little bit more overstyled than Seikos, not quite as tooly, but that sapphire crystal I think makes such a difference, certainly does to me. Perhaps I'll chase up one of those strap code Jubilees and see how I go. I think that bracelet could take this watch to the next level and keep the price down to under $300. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.